Hey everybody, so I'm going to do a little video on preparing and planning for a kayak camping trip. So what you really want to figure out is how long do I have to do this trip, and that's the predominant factor that's going to kind of all your other planning is going to fit into that parameter. So sometimes you got an overnighter, sometimes it's a day trip. You know, I'm going to start here, I'm going to end here, and I got 6 or 7 hours. Or like we're doing, we're going to have 8 days from Saturday to Saturday coming up. So we can get in a considerable chunk of river. And in doing so, you need to kind of think about what kind of river do you want to do? Do you want to do a really slow, lazy river? Do you want to do a pretty adventurous, more mountainous river with some current and a lot of rapids? Does this river have a lot of dams on it for portage? These are all things we're going to go over and look at. Alright, so let's talk about length of time. We got 7 days. How much of that day, each day, do we want to devote to paddling? When I go by myself, I usually plan on 10 hours a day paddling pretty strong, and I average 4 miles an hour even in minimal current. So I can do 35, 40 miles a day. That's just, you know, no big deal. Portages will slow you down on stuff like that. Stretches with lots of rapids, it seems like it would speed you up, but actually the maneuvering around the rocks and whatnot will actually slow you down. If your river's low and you have no current, you're going to be moving a lot slower if you're doing a lot of scoochies or getting out and walking. So let's plan for a group. Let's plan on 2 miles an hour moving average on a river or an ocean, unless you're in a high-level group, in which case you probably wouldn't need to watch this video anyway. So let's take this back down to someone who's kind of starting out, and let's just say you're going to move about 2 miles an hour on the water. And that's kind of an average for any boat, any water. If you get up in a mountain river with a lot of current and it's really flowing, you can sit still and travel at 4 or 5 miles an hour, no problem. But for planning purposes, that's not a good way to do it. Because if you're planning for 5 and you're moving 2, you're going to be in trouble. If you're planning for 2 and you're moving 5, that's an easy problem to overcome. So let's stick with 2 miles an hour moving time. Now the river we're going to is the New River, and it's got a pretty fair amount of current, and especially right now it's running pretty good. So I'm going to estimate that we're going to add back on at least a mile or 2 in our moving average. And I've done the New River before at higher water. I've done it at a little low water. If it's super dry, that's going to come down a little bit. On the Greenbrier last year, most of the time when we floated, because we had good water, we were floating between 3 and 5 miles an hour. Just floating, not even paddling. So I'm going to say we're going to have a 2 mile an hour current to aid us on the New River this year. And that's going to make us travel at 4 miles an hour. And since that's pretty good, I'm going to be safe and I'm going to say let's take a mile an hour off that. Now we're at 3 miles an hour. So if I want to do 3 miles an hour for 10 hours, that's 30 miles. So I'm going to establish that as the limit of how far we'll go in any one day, 30 miles. That's a full day. If the day you start, you shouldn't plan on doing 30 miles that day. You may have trouble in setting shuttle, you got your travel time, and I usually just plan on catching like 4 to 10 miles or something, just to kind of get the kinks out, get on the water, get away from the put-in, get to a campsite, and then the next day you'll start in earnest paddling. Now this year on the New River we're taking a pretty sizable group, and another consideration with any group is every time you add a person to the group, your time moving is going to come down a little bit. And to start this trip this year, we're going to have 5 of us. It'll be myself, Greg, Chris, Brian, Keith, and Yackleberry is going to be joining us on this trip. We're all going to be starting up there at the put-in, and a few days into it, we're going to pick up 4 more paddlers that are going to meet us kind of at the halfway point. And so at that point, I'm going to slow this trip down a considerable amount. There's some new paddlers on that leg, and we're just going to go about half pace of what we're doing above there. So we'll make some pretty good time in the first leg. When we pick up those extra 4 guys, that's going to bring our total group number to 9. I'm going to back way off that, and it works out pretty good with where we're starting and where we're stopping. So then you need to say what kind of water is in any kind of river. Are you a class 1 paddler, class 2 paddler, class 3 paddler, 4 or 5? There's a couple things to think about here. A Class 3 river is not a river with Class 3s in it. A Class 3 river has Class 3s all the way down it, and it could have bigger, Class 4s in there. But a Class 1 river or Class 2 river with a couple Class 3s, that's a whole different animal. And is it a big river, where you have plenty of time between the rapids to kind of collect gear up if anyone's swimming? Keeping the river within your level of expertise or whatever you want to bite off is something to think about. I wouldn't suggest a newbie coming out there and grabbing a big Class 3 river starting at the bottom, or going alone on any river that has Class 3, 4s in it without having someone there that's been on that river or that knows what they're doing. The river I've selected this year, like I say, is the New River. It's big, it's got ledges, it's got rapids, it keeps everybody happy. And it's not too boring. And it's got a little bit of a couple spots with some pretty big rapids, big water rapids, not technical, but they're pretty big, and there may be some boys swimming in there. But after the rapid, there's going to be lots of place to collect gear up and clean up the yard sale and get everybody back in their boat, have a few laughs, and take a break if we need to, and move on from there. It's not going to be super continual rapids all the way down the river. If you're doubting your expertise in what kind of rapids you want to take, why don't you start off with some Class 1 rivers, which will be more towards the coastal or Piedmont areas, whatever state you're living in. Here in North Carolina, we're lucky. We have as big as you want to go whitewater to some intermediate rivers in the Piedmont area, and then you have your coastal rivers, which are pretty much long, flat, even swampy rivers, and then you have the coast. So you can do an intercoastal trip if you want to, or you can do something out in the ocean. So you have all the kayaking you'd ever want to do here in North Carolina. It makes these trip planning exercises pretty exciting, because you can kind of bite off whatever you're looking to bite off, as big or as small. Another important aspect of a river that you may or may not be thinking about is dam control. So most rivers, for water supply for municipalities and for controlling flood situations, most major river systems are dammed now. The Greenbrier up in West Virginia is the longest undammed river east of the Mississippi, and it's the last completely uncontrolled river east of the Mississippi. So the New River has several dams, and we're actually starting at the base of a dam. So at that point, you're going to have a reset to the water level. As far as, if it rained and it spiked above you, it's not going to spike below you per se, unless they're having a big kind of flood event where they're letting water out. But they may have a release schedule where they've got a schedule that says we're going to release this much or that much, or we're not going to release because it's a drought. All those things can play a big factor in your planning. And actually, Adam from Yackleberry had called me, hit me up for some advice on a river he was planning on. And the initial one was just up and down on the spikes. And what you can do is visit the USGS gauge, and they'll show you the river levels for any section of river where they have a gauge site there. And this river he was looking at was just so far up and down by several feet that I thought, that's kind of odd, but it's just the way that dam was releasing their water. Their schedule was it wasn't very uniform. It was very, very peaked and then troughed. So you'll either have like no water in there or a lot of water, and it'd be pretty rambunctious, and then your camping is going to be determined by that too. So think of your dams, think of the river levels, and you can contact those dams and get release schedules from usually it's the dam keeper or the Army Corps of Engineers, whoever's operating that dam. They can tell you what they're going to be doing most of the time with their releases. Another thing to think about is what kind of river do you want to do in regards to the scenery. Myself personally, I like remote rivers, and they can be small or big. I just like to be remote, and that's sometimes hard to do this part of the country. Up in Alaska, it's very easy to do. In Canada, you can get to feeling pretty secluded. But in the southeast United States, it's hard to get away for a long time on a river, because so much of our infrastructure and community and culture was built along the river banks. So that being said, when you're looking at your river, you see this golf course here. That's not going to be a bad thing for me, but it's not going to be the highlight of my day. As we get into areas where there's a lot more vegetation and just untouched wilderness, so to speak, that's the kind of river I enjoy most, the seclusion of it. Other people that may have a different feeling on that, so if you can back out, look at your rivers. Is this the kind of river you want to do? Is it wild enough for you, or is it urban enough for you? So on our trips, our guys, we like to eat a restaurant lunch or a dinner once a day if possible. It's not always possible, but if we can, we'll stop, get out of our boats. Sometimes the restaurant's right on the riverbank, and we'll all eat a burger or sweet tea if you've seen the videos, and just kind of enjoy being out of the boats and enjoy a restaurant, kind of hitting a lot of different spots down, the rivers. The Greenbrier was fantastic for that, but you cannot do that if you're completely secluded from all civilization. So these are all factors to think about when you're picking your river out. Another thing to think about is logistics. How far away is this river from my house? How do we get there? Do I know anyone there that can help set a shuttle? How do we set the shuttle? And logistics is always one of the big drivers in the planning process. It's the piece that you cannot do without. If you don't have a way to get to the put-in and a way to link back up at the takeout, you're kind of just flapping. It's easy to get to one place, and just go and then be hitchhiking or trying to do something. But to run a good trip, you're going to need to have all those pieces sorted out. And I have a contact up in Hinton, West Virginia, that we met last year, super guy. And so I've contacted him early on, and he's going to run the shuttle for us to the put-in, which is actually south. And then he's also going to be able to help pick us up at the takeout. In addition, the day we meet up with the second part of our crew is also the day that we get to the big dam. And so there's going to be a sizable portage that you would not want to have to do with a loaded boat without a vehicle. He's going to have my vehicle there waiting on us, and he's going to run the portage. We'll probably eat a little lunch with him. And right after the portage, we'll be on the banks below the dam, and we'll meet up with the rest of the crew there. So there's a little bit of finagling your logistics and getting that plan worked out, working out some of the details. So now that you know how far you can go, what kind of river, you got some logistics, you can actually say, okay, look, if I want to paddle 20 miles a day for 5 days, that's 100 miles. So then you go looking into rivers that have 100 mile of river. And you can start out small, very small sometimes, and get very big. But then you want to see, does this river have a lot of dams? Has it got a lot of lakes? What does this river look like? And you can get into Google Earth to do some of this, and as you see my screen here. So this is the Cape Fear River trip I did a few years back, and I've got several other rivers and whatnot. But what I did is, and I do this on all my rivers, I put a mile marker by using the path tool. You just kind of trace your river and watch the mileage. Every 10 miles, I put a mile marker with a waypoint and label it, 10, 20, 30, all the way to the end of the river. And then I also put any waypoints that I need to pay attention to, like, hey, there's a restaurant here that we want to hit, get off the river for a few minutes, get a burger, here's a potential campsite, anything like that that you want to put on that map that's relevant to your trip, you label those places. And then once you get all the mileage in there, you say, okay, that first day, and I bit off a pretty big chunk because I was alone, so I got about 20 miles in my first half day. And that was from Sax Paw down to there. Did have a portage that day as well, so I was pretty beat after that. And, I'll put a campsite logo. I want to be camping somewhere near that site. And sometimes these places work out, sometimes they don't. But what you want to look for on your maps for a campsite, if you have a river with a heavy bend in it, the inside corner will usually be tapered off in a low-sloping sandy bank that'll give you something to camp on. Otherwise, I look for islands, and I do both of those in very uninhabited areas. You don't want to be disturbed or disturb anyone else, and you don't want to be taking over someone else's campsite or property or dock or anything like that, of course, without permission. So if you can camp below the high water mark, or on an island, you're good to go. So once you get all your miles marker in there, you can go down and say, okay, I got 20, the next day I want to do 30. So that would leave me about mile marker number 50. And as you see, I have my little camping logo waypoint there. So I know once I get in that area, a little more, a little less, that's where I'll start looking for a campsite. Another thing you can do after these paths is you can fly the river. So I'm going to go to my new river trip, and I'm going to fly that. So I got my path measure, new river trip. Click on that little 3 triangle icon. It takes me way up here to the new river. And it'll actually fly this for me. And I can take that off. You can see the river. I've got the altitude set right. So now I'm flying down the river, and that allows me to hands-off scout it. You kind of see what's coming. Click that off. I see there's some islands there. I exaggerate my topo in my settings to 1, which would allow me to see the banks, the topography a little better than the standard flat. So you know you could jump on any one of those islands. That's not going to be a problem. Plenty of camping opportunities. Got a big city coming up. So something to think, hey, you don't want to camp near a city, camp before or after. All those things you can do when you're scouting from your Google Earth. Another resource you can use are paddling guides. And I have some whitewater books, but these are not so much. These are Eastern North Carolina books. And there's guys that have spent a long time on the water in boats paddling, and they've documented all the different rivers and all the little creeks oftentimes within the river system. And this is one I use, Paddler's Guide to Eastern North Carolina by Bob Benner, Tom McLeod. This is Paddling Eastern North Carolina with Paul Ferguson. Both of them are great books. Sometimes I'll find something in one that's not in the other, and they'll rate the difficulty, they'll rate the distances and the scenery, and then they'll give a brief description of each of the sections of a river. So that's a good resource if you're looking at what river you want to do. Get some books for whatever area you're in, and listen to what some experts who've done all those rivers say about it. They'll often give you, a little bit of an opinion about how they like the river or whatnot. You can pick that up in these books and know, this might be a good one for me or this might not. To make it easy on yourself, go paddling when you're comfortable being wet in the outdoors. If it's 80 degrees, that's pretty much perfect for me. If it's 100 degrees, it's going to be pretty hot. You're going to be introducing, some heat casualty risk. Sitting in a kayak all day, you're going to be overheating potentially. You can always get in and swim, but if you're trying to make miles on a river, it's just a consideration. Of course, I've paddled in very hot temperatures before, but like I say, it's just a planning consideration. Is it going to be scorching? It's not as pleasant. Is it going to be too cold and chilly? Do you not have the right gear? It's not going to be pleasant. So try to plan your trips weather-wise to whatever you can stay comfortable in and safe. Now that you're getting the pieces of your trip planned out, you kind of got the mileage figured out, you kind of have some templated camping spots, who's going with you. Sometimes that can drive the trip at the beginning. Sometimes you got your trip, now you want to pick a partner. Make sure you're picking someone who's on board for doing what you're planning on doing. If they're not going to be happy, and or you're not going to be happy, one or the other. So when I'm doing my trips with the group, I just know that we're not going to be doing like paddling from dawn till dark as hard as we can go. No one in the group wants to do that. I do that on my own trips, so I leave those trips to me. And this trip's a more relaxed kind of deal. We may still have to make some miles on some days, and we may still have to get to a certain point before we can stop paddling. I've been hijacked by my dog. Another thing I want to talk to you about is campsite selection. Now you can plan and you can kind of template where you want to be camping and pick out some good spots on the map, but until you actually see those spots, you're not exactly sure what you're getting into. So one thing I do is when I get within a mile or two of that area, I start looking seriously at taking the next available workable campsite that's going to work. Another thing I do to help me make that decision all day, though, is as I'm paddling down the river, each time I see a site, hey, that'd be a great campsite, I look at my watch and I look at my mileage for the day. And I have my GPS running so I can look down and say, oh, I'm at 140 miles per se. And then I paddle on. When I see the next site, oh, there's another good site. I look down at my watch, how much time has passed and how many miles have I passed? What's the new mileage? And I do that through the day, all day, each day. It's just something I do, kind of cataloging the frequency of good campsites that I'm seeing. Because a river normally stays within character. Sometimes it changes slowly over time. Sometimes it changes quickly. But this gives you at least something to work off of. So if I'm seeing one campsite every hour on a river, then I know if I'm passing one right now and I'm within a mile of the campsite, it's a good chance that I need to take this one or paddle another hour, because historically during the day, that's what's been happening. But if I've been seeing one every 15 minutes, I just keep going till you find the perfect site. And usually that works out pretty good. So now that you got some of the major parts of your trip planning done, it's time to fly down the river like this and start picking out some other options that you may not have listed on there so far. Like, I've got that little waypoint that says lots of food. I researched that road. There's a lot of restaurants on that road. Here's a rapid. If there was a big rapid, some rivers have some big rapids, as does this one, I would take a picture of that rapid and then blow it up, take a big picture of it, and put that on my map for that day, and note it, like, say, Surprise Rapid or Narrows Rapid or whatever rapid you got. As you're coming up to it, on your map, laminated map that you're going to make, have a blow-up of that. And that could be of a portage, that could be of any kind of thing of note in that regard. So that's just a lot of the planning forethought I put into these trips. That's not everything, because that would be a very long, boring video. But that's kind of hitting a lot of the major points that hopefully will help you plan out a trip of any length. And appreciate you watching. The next part of this, the next video, will be a gear selection and packing video with the boat. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.